Jim? Yep. Hi, everybody. I feel like I'm kind of a baby here in this group. I'm kind of new to you guys. Wow, that was great. Thanks, Ron. I really loved all that information. Lots of pearls there kind of fell out of your pockets. That was nice. So I guess I should learn how to move this thing forward. You just click the mouse. Is that what you did? One click. Oh, and the key. Oh, great. That's great. So Jim said briefly, like, I work in Ashland, and I work with a group through the Mediri Foundation that was founded by Donald Yance, and he's a nutritionist, master herbalist, and has focused his life energy on the treatment of cancer. And so most of my work is seeing cancer patients, and we literally see hundreds and have thousands of patients on our register, but actively hundreds at this time. And it gives us an interesting perspective, and I want to kind of weave that in through this, but I do see a lot of children as well, and especially with neurological disorders, and I'm able to help them using an integrative approach. And my piece here today, I'm going to try to stay focused on the botanicals, because a lot of you are brilliant minds associated with the nutritional component of things, and there's a lot in there. There's a lot of genetic information. There's a lot of great dietary things. And I've got a few things in here that we can kind of breeze through with nutrients, but I definitely want to really hit the botanical part of things and give a lot of energy to that part, because it's really important. And listening to Ron talk and the complexity of nutrient interactions is something that we're just tapping the surface of, and the complexity of genetics and 32 possible metabolites of B12. That's, how do we understand all those? Well, one of the things that's beautiful about being an herbalist is that the plants are even less studied within the modern paradigm, but they have the longest history of use. And being trained in traditional Chinese medicine, you literally had thousands of years with millions of doctors treating billions of patients, watching people and applying therapies. And these would be doctors and sons and daughters of doctors, and 19 generations of people using the same materials to treat the same kind of diseases we're seeing today. So we have a lot of observational, empirical data that we can use and pull from to understand how to utilize these therapies in situations. And I'm going to talk a lot more about what plants do that other things don't do. So how do we address issues from our approach? Well, we approach the neurological health with a holistic framework. Look at the causes. I think everybody here is understanding that. Look at the cause. If it is a nutrient deficiency and we can discover that, great, we can do that. But oftentimes there's several causes, and we want to get to the bottom of that. Apply proven botanical nutritional therapeutics. That's really what I'm going to talk about here today. Botanicals. So this is sort of the framework that Donald Yance created. He calls it the eclectic triphasic medical system, and the three branches are part of kind of how we view the world and the human being. So just having the human being itself, and you're looking at the person and you're analyzing them from the perspective of blood work, but you're also looking at their constitution, their nails, their hair. You're talking to them. It's the sound of their voice. It's everything you can take in about that person to understand the human being and the human energy. Branch 2 being their external environment, and the external environment, of course, being all the things that we think about in the branch 2 idea, where it's toxins, it's our environmental pollutants that we have in our world right now, but it's also things like your emotional state, your social environment, and also things like what you eat, your diet, which is one of our most intimate connections to our environment itself. And branch 3 is the biological terrain, and that's the way that we look at things using lab work, pathology tests in cancer, doing genetic tests, doing in vitro resistance and sensitivity screening, doing a deeper look at the microscopic level, and even down to the level of seeing DNA and using polymerase chain reaction results to determine appropriate therapies for patients. So putting these three pieces together, we get a nice picture of the person, and we're able to achieve something much more helpful than if we're just looking at one of those aspects. So the ETMS is a vitalistic approach. It's an interconnected system. Everything is interrelated, and our belief is that the patient has the inherent ability to heal and be well with trophorestoration. And I'll just talk about trophorestoration, what that means. We want to harmonize the body and align the elements of health in them so that the body sings. And we've got kind of this idea that there's a conductor here. We're kind of conducting this symphony of interactive elements in the body. So when we talk about trophorestoration, the idea of the trophic state is the vital capacity of a system or tissue in the body. So that's really important, that the vital capacity of a system or tissue, how much stress can something take, and under stress, how does it manifest its dysfunction, right? And so this is a great quote from Todd Caldecott. He's actually an Ayurvedic doctor, and this is his approach. He looks at the trophic restoration as in chronic states of irritation or depression, some degree of vital deficiency will manifest in the affected tissue with a gradual loss of functional capability. This vital deficiency can have many causes: inherited weakness, environmental toxins, drug therapies, etc. And so what we want to do is apply therapies that actually restore the trophic state of the tissues. And I'm saying that from a general perspective because, again, we can't know all ends. We're never going to have every molecule defined and every gene laid out. You can't, who knows what future that is where you can just give a sample of some tissue in your body and suddenly we know every aspect of the physiology. We don't know that. So we're dependent on therapies that actually can do things that are multitasking. That plants is our foundation, the foundation of our work, and how they can work with the body to achieve things that just using a nutrient or a drug can't do. Not to say that you have to have the right nutrition. Plants can move things around, but if you're deficient in a nutrient, we've got to get to that nutrient too. So we try to create a synergistic relationship between plants, nutrients, and if needed, even a pharmaceutical agent to create health in our patients. So a successful protocol addresses, and I don't know if this is an empty slide, but it obviously addresses the whole person. Let's see, the underlying cause, the symptomatology, and the energetic profile of the person. So kind of just putting our whole medicine in the middle of how we can address the whole person. And the ETMS is sort of Donnie's way of saying, hey, this is what we do. And the energetic profile is absolutely essential. I teach a lot, and I talk to a lot of people who are just fascinated by the work we're doing on studying the molecular aspect of the blood, and studying the DNA, and studying the genetics of tumors. And that's all they want. And they want to, I've got a cancer patient. I want to get a target now test. It's 87 genes. How do I interpret all these genes? And I say, well, that's great. We want to do that. But what's the person like? Where do they come from? What are they thinking? Is this person robust or are they weak? It doesn't matter. If we find that this chemotherapy is targeted for that person based on genetics, but you look at that person, there's no way they can tolerate that therapy. Let's put it together and let's make the right choice. So I'm just trying to say, the science gets really fascinating, and our minds love that. We're in the rational mind period right now in our development. But I'm coming from kind of a mythical perspective with my traditional Chinese medical background. We're looking at a little bit of a different take, an elemental take of the human body. So I'm trying to bring the things together. I want to still integrate the magical, the archaic, the mythical ideas with the rational, bring it all together, and see if we can make some more sense out of it all. I do something called layering lenses, which is what I love to do. I studied applied kinesiology. Well, there's a lens that I use there. I studied Chinese medicine. I use that lens. Modern biomolecular diagnosis. Try to put them all together, and hopefully they focus the image and don't make it blurry when I apply different lenses. If there is a blurriness that comes in, I know I've got more work to do, more homework. Hopefully it's all going to focus in using my different layers. Just kind of drop into the talk a little bit, the hypothalamus bridge, and Dr. Tom did a great job of hitting, I just love that system. It's just so beautiful, the way that you can look at the development of the brain and the different organ systems, the system of secreting glands. One of the most important ones being this relationship between the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And a lot of our therapies are actually directed at what we call the HPTA axis, right? The hypothalamic, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal axis. That's the central organizing system within the organ networks. So inside of our endocrine system is a central organizing system, and that's at the top of this is the hypothalamic and pituitary relationship. So you're connecting the central nervous system and the endocrine system via the pituitary. I think it was Dr. Tom actually who taught me in school. I actually took his class a couple times, and he gave this really nice analogy of how the pineal gland, if you look at the body as sort of a symphony, the pineal gland acts as the conductor, the timekeeper. And then past the pineal gland, you have the hypothalamus, who works as the composer, who's composing the piece. And I see the hypothalamus as this system of roots down into the body that's measuring everything, just listening really carefully, making changes, telling the pituitary gland, who would then be the director of what's happening, actually directing the musicians, who are actually the organs. And it's that relationship that we want to work with. So we'll look at somebody, you can address their organ systems, but if you're not addressing that HPTA axis, you're never going to get to the core of a lot of their issues. And so a lot of our therapies based on adaptogenic plants have just incredible data, incredible history at being able to really help the body adapt at that central nervous system, the central organizing system, the HPTA axis, the neuroendocrine system. Here's our this is kind of like just a little overview of all the things that we're trying to address here, all of our players, some of the key secreting glands in our system, with our HPA in the center of that. The adrenal system, that's probably the place I work the most, whether it's children or adults today, is in the kidney essence adrenal system. That network, it's the foundation. We develop it up to 18 months of age. It's so important. But everything is playing its role, and it's all together. We want to look at things specifically, and then get back to the root and the core, balancing the central organizing network. So I want to talk a little bit about chronic stress. How does chronic stress impact the brain? Well, there's an amazing system of feedback loops in the body, one being the hypothalamus to the pituitary with cortico-releasing hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone from the pituitary, stimulating the adrenal gland to secrete cortisol. Well, for the Chinese medical people, we have something that we called essence, which I'm going to talk about a little bit further in the talk. But I see the adrenal glands sitting atop the kidneys, which are the source of our essence. And the adrenal glands are sort of directing how we use that essence. And in Chinese medicine, this concept is very firm. It's not like some, wishy-washy kind of thing. Its essence is the foundation of how we make ourselves. So it's this material that's not really definable, but it becomes anything. It becomes any hormone, any neurotransmitter. It becomes anything we need it to be, bone marrow, whatever we want, brain tissue, neurological tissue. So the adrenals sit on top of the kidneys and direct the essence. What's it going to be? What's it going to become? And the glucocorticoids, of course, are the important part of it, and cortisol especially, being the big one I want to talk about today. And chronic stress is going to make the adrenals put out more essence in the form of cortisol. It's kind of like a racehorse who's starts to race. The body shifts into this racing mode. Everybody's driving around, racing around, running around, looking at their TV, doing their video games, and you're constantly pushing this cortisol system to secrete more cortisol. Well, that leads to a lot of problems for us down the road. And in our young people, we see it doesn't take that long to have problems, especially when you have several different layers demanding more stress response because they're stressors. All those things playing together add up to a detrimental situation that we have to combat in the body. So that racehorse analogy is really to tell you that when you're racing, you shift your body into the stress response. You actually look at a horse, it looks different when it's standing than it's running. Things change. And cortisol has a lot of interesting effects on the body, especially with blood sugar levels, affecting other hormones, putting energy into the fight or flight mechanism rather than putting it into resting and digesting and storing and building bone and building nerves. You're actually pulling from a lot of those areas to keep yourself running at a high state. So what results in this world today is oxidative stress. So what do we have? Cytokines, cell signaling system, transcription factors like nuclear factor kappa beta. Big players in our work in cancer, these are really big, but also in any kind of neurological disorders, cardiovascular disease. What happens is you get abnormal redox metabolism, impaired mitochondria, and our scales there are showing you, reactive oxygen species and antioxidants. So you have this sort of balance in the body. We call it the redox cycling system. It's a system of reducing and oxidizing compounds in order to maintain homeostasis within that oxidative or redox system. So mitochondrial dysfunction actually is really a big deal today, and you'll find it in a lot of different people. You find it in people on statin drugs, for example. If you stop giving the body enough CoQ10, if you deplete that system, well, the mitochondria starts to fall apart and people start to get myopathies. Evidence now showing that mitochondrial dysfunction is a big player in neurological disorders, especially in the aging diseases like Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, but also in autism. There's some great studies out there on autism and oxidative damage that's inducing mitochondrial dysfunction. What does the mitochondria do? Everybody here is probably pretty familiar with the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell, cellular energy transfer. We're really talking about how the body takes in nutrients and turns it into energy that we can use to drive all of our cellular systems. If that system breaks down, a whole host of problems ensue. So when the membrane integrity, that's one of the places it's measured, is the mitochondrial membrane integrity. When that breaks down, the transport of materials becomes unclear. It's kind of a turbidity in the system, and then things start to break down, lots of mechanisms. So when you decrease the production of ATP, you can't do things like repair your nerves. You can't repair your brain. You can't think clearly. You lose your memory. You lose muscle action, muscle skills. Children have a hard time focusing. All these kind of things that fall into mitochondrial dysfunction. It's one of many aspects of what we're seeing in the neurological degeneration process. In autism spectrum disorders, you see that
MD, mitochondrial dysfunction, is more common than the general population. And this was a review of 12 studies, and this is Daniel Rosea, which he's with the National Foundation studying this autism. 12 studies. Mitochondrial problems were more likely to lose acquired skills compared to children with autism in general. So mitochondrial issues showing up in our children, not just the long-term diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, where you see this really, it's much more clear in these areas. But you see that in Parkinson's and autism, or in Alzheimer's, you find that severe autism or severe disease is associated with beta amyloid deposition, which is, and again, a breakdown of that redox cycling system. So you've got this buildup of a protein called beta amyloid, or Alzheimer precursor protein. That protein is actually measurable in the blood, and now we can actually see that it's measurable in these autistic kids. And you can see that it actually shows up as 4 times more present in children with autism than children without them, and especially associated with severe autism. So when it's severe, you see that the beta amyloid is even getting higher. So more of that redox breakdown. So the body's getting more of these nuclear factor kappa beta reactions, more inflammation, more oxidative stress, inducing this change that's happening for them. Okay? And we're going to get into kind of some of the reasons why this is occurring. Heavy metals are one reason, and I don't really think I need to go too deep into this, but there's so much research and so many consistent findings showing that, heavy metals showing up. But the thing that's interesting to me is, why don't all of us show up with these problems? Well, we don't all, because each person manifests a different system. We're all unique. So some people can take that, an amount of mercury they're getting from amalgams or from some other source in their body, from fish. Maybe they've got arsenic poisoning or something else, and they're able to just kind of, utilize their glutathione system really efficiently, utilize their superoxide dismutase system. They're able to clear those things in a way that maintains homeostasis for that person. For another person, maybe they have a weaker system, they don't have as good of a mechanism to deal with that heavy metal toxicity, and then it shows up as neurological symptoms. So it's not just one thing or the other, it's just that we're all unique, and some of us adapt better than others. And that's the word I want to keep hitting on today, is adapt, because what I'm going to present is how we can use our adaptogenic remedies to help people through these serious problems with our current environmental situation. Some of the things that have come up today a lot, obviously copper and iron, I think we've hit on that pretty well. It's funny, I do a lot of work with copper actually, and in my work, we're generally trying to drive copper levels down as hard as we can, because copper is actually the dependent cofactor for many of the vascular endothelial growth factor pathways. So for angiogenesis to occur, 7 out of the known 10 or 12 angiogenic pathways are copper dependent. And when you watch cancer patients' blood work, you see copper levels go up, ceruloplasmin levels go up, and zinc levels go down. I'll tell you, 90% of the people I see with cancer have a depleted zinc and an elevated copper. Ratio is about 2 to 1. So I get skewed because I view that in cancer patients. Now, in the rest of the world, you people looking, it's important to maintain balance, and that's what it's all about. But it's just really interesting to me to think outside of my everyday approach, which is to, man, we gotta shut down angiogenesis. And in some people, if we get a person to no evidence of disease, one of the ways we can really help them is to get all the copper in their body down to a level of about 10 to 12 nanograms per deciliter. If we can get that to that level and hold them there for 3 years with no tumors that are bigger than 2 millimeters, you can actually get incredible remission. And that's coming from Dr. Dwight McKee. He's been doing it for 12 years now. He's 44 years in that field. And we do that with a drug called tetrathiomolybdate. But that's kind of another long story, but just I'm thinking about it a little bit differently in my world. So when I think about, in the balance of people, zinc deficiency is an issue, but I really like Ron's approach that you have to get the zinc and the copper and the magnesium and the vitamin D, and on it goes, balanced in everybody. And don't push one mineral, one nutrient, one direction. Aluminum, mercury, iron, drug toxicities. These are big stresses that all lead to stressing out that mitochondrial function, stressing out that redox system. Like I said, in essence, that concept, I know it's hard to just kind of get that concept just on the fly here. I spent 4,000 hours of study in Chinese medicine for me. But just think of it as the substance that you don't know about that becomes everything that you are. Okay? And some of the things that you really see when people's essence is deficient are things like hydrochloric acid. People get weak, their hydrochloric acid production goes down. We call it the stomach fire. You don't have that fire anymore. And you see people lose that lust for life. They lose that passion. They get depressed. The fire is low in there. And the actual animal is the dragon in the stomach, in Chinese medicine. So it's always hungry. It wants to be hot. It wants to burn up the food. Well, we know now that you've got to actually break apart, cleave these molecules to separate them into what we can digest, absorb, assimilate, right? Well, other things are glutathione. It's a big place. If the essence is weak in the person, you're not going to be able to make glutathione. This is a constant replenishment that's got to happen in the body. I mean, the thyroid gland is a beautiful place to watch glutathione and see how important something like selenium, which helps us recycle glutathione, is. The thyroid is a hot burning place. It's directing metabolic rate. In kids, it's really burning hot. That's why if you're near a radioactive plant and you get exposed to radioactive iodine, you got to take a ton of iodine so you don't get that radioactive stuff in there, because it's going to fill up all your sites real quickly on your thyroglobulin molecules, and you're going to be in trouble. Just saying that there's these elements of how essence becomes things in the body, and it takes a big demand. And when we're weak in essence, you're going to find certain areas get depleted. Thyroid is another one of them. But glutathione is a big one. So we start to lose the ability to actually reduce or oxidize in an appropriate way to get rid of heavy metals, to get rid of environmental toxins, and clear them out of the body. SNPs, SNPs, I don't really want to go into this. I think people are going to really hit this pretty hard today, and probably tomorrow. But the thing that I love to think about with all this is that we are all genetically different, and so I always want to find out where people came from. What are their roots? What's their history? Do they come from the Middle East, or do they come from somewhere in Europe or in Asia? That makes a big difference to me in thinking about their diet, thinking about the potentials for them. I do actually often look at MTHFR defects, and I find them in children actually pretty often. I've found several with 1298, MTHFR defects, homo or heterozygous, having problems, again, back to methylation. So these are things to look at. Also, the vitamin D receptors are a really important one to look at. It's great. These are really important places to look, but I'm going to leave it up to some of the other experts here to kind of really cover those areas, okay? I want to talk a minute about vaccines, and again, I don't think vaccines are the issue, but I don't like vaccines, and I don't, the flu vaccine is something I don't recommend for my patients. It's funny, I always get the difficult cases, the weird cases, and I always get the people that got the sickest they've ever been after they took the flu. I mean, I had one of my long-term patients was sick for 3 months after the flu vaccine last year. She asked me about a week ago, should I take the flu vaccine against this year? And I'm saying, wow, okay, no, I don't think you should. Let's get your vitamin D right. Let's get your essential fats right. Let's take care of your, how we can take care of you and support your immune system. One of the things that Eli Jones, one of the great cancer physicians of the 1800s, said was that the vaccines actually weaken the immune system, and he thought, in his 40-plus years of working with cancer patients, that vaccines were a big part of why cancer was slipping through the cracks, why we were missing things in the immune system, because we're disrupting our normal immune function. This is a big conversation and one I don't want to get into here, but we do approach vaccines with people, and there are some vaccine choices and people that you have to help people make the right choice, of course, and sometimes it is the right thing. If so, we like people to take an adaptogenic formula for a week before and 1 to 2 weeks after any vaccine is given, using other things like echinacea, which is a really nice immune builder, but it's actually more of a spleen tonic, and it's actually used long term. It really has nothing to do with colds and flus. That's all. I'm not sure where these things get in the limelight, and then they just turn into something different. It's really funny. Vitamin D is now in the limelight, and it's the chia seeds are now in the limelight. It's just, over years you watch these things, and you're like, God, come on, it's all part of the big picture. So, but getting people all the right things and supporting their immune system through vaccine therapy is important. Nutrigenomics. Nutrigenomics is a big field right now. Foods that we eat, that's the closest link we have to our environment. And the foods that we eat actually inform us about the environment, about the season, about what's happening for us in nature. It's our most intimate connection with nature, actually. And it's so cool to see the research that's coming out, the sulforaphanes, glucosinolates, isothiocyanates, the compounds from broccoli, cabbage, wasabi rhizome, things that actually turn on tumor suppressor genes. They also protect us. They also rebuild glutathione. It's phenomenal what we're seeing. They actually influence the epigenetics. And that's the thing about genes. You look at these people and you say, oh, my dad got cardiovascular disease, or my dad had this. I'm going to get that. Well, no, you're not. Genes don't exist in space. They exist in the context of your environment. So if you do the same things that your mom and dad did, you're going to get the same diseases that they did to some degree. But if you change your lifestyle with the knowledge of where things went wrong for them, and you can change that, you can actually overcome your genetics with your epigenetics. What kind of proteins are being expressed by those genes? How much of the protein? Is there enough to have its effect, or is there too much? Is it mutated, or is it wild type? How does that work? And so epigenetics are really important. And foods and diet influence that in a huge way. So I just want to talk a little bit about the diet stuff. You know, one of my teachers was Tim Francis. He's an applied kinesiologist that I have great respect for, and he used to, you know, he wouldn't even see a patient if they weren't off of what he always would say: wheat, dairy, corn, soy, nuts, seeds, chips, popcorn, cocoa, caffeine, alcohol, and nicotine for 3 weeks. He wouldn't even see it. 6-month waiting list, $500 to walk in his door. And I was like, really? That's really weird. And then after years of working, I found that, oh my God, most people come in for pain, or they didn't fall off a horse, they didn't get by a car, their shoulder hurts. Well, what happened? I don't know. I think it's because I do this thing every day. You know, I roll this ball for my cat. I don't think so. You know, I sew, or, you know, it's the context of that low-grade inflammatory response that's causing problems that then manifest in an area. And if you overuse something under that influence, you're going to have problems. If you're real healthy, you probably won't have repetitive motion disorders. So you've got to think in the whole system again. So I go back to the kind of Paleolithic diet. I like to kind of adapt that to people. Sometimes Berkeley Heart Labs to find little things like, you know, lipoprotein deficiencies or differences, ApoE4. If you find those things, you can kind of adjust people basically that way. But most people, I just like them to eat lots of vegetables, tons of vegetables, especially kids, because they're all eating cake and candy and popcorn and Pop-Tarts and pies, and you got it. That stuff is just neurotoxic. There's no question, and it's gut disrupting, and it's inflammatory. It makes you crazy. It does, and we all think everybody here knows that. I think, right? So most people like you know that this is the first place we need to address kids. Take away the insult, right? Doesn't matter how many therapies you apply. If you don't take away the insult, you're just never going to get them well. Not to the degree that you could if you took away the insult and then gave them the right therapies. Then they get really well. And you know what's really cool? Then they can mess around a little bit too. They can have a little bit of play food and junk food. They can have cake at the birthday party, but just don't do it every day. Don't do it all the time. You'll go down that same road again. Got Flora, just a little bit further, just, you know, a lot of the evidence around neurological disorders and its connection to gut inflammation. A lot of work on probiotics, showing that probiotics help, but a lot of things help. You know, get the diet right, get the probiotics in place if they need it. You know, just get them doing the right things for that person and make the gut work well, because that's where the neurotransmitters are coming from. That's where you're, when you feel it, you know it, all of that. Man, look at these guts. I mean, these kids that come to me with depression, anxiety, autism, God, they always have that. They've got this, acid regurg, heartburn. They've got, digestive complaints, and then they can't sleep at night, and so it's all woven together. You've got to treat them as a whole person, and getting the gut right is the first place that I start. Absolutely. So how can we help people in the big picture? Apply our proven botanical and nutritional therapeutics. That plant on the left, that's Rhodiola rosea. It's an adaptogen that is one of our primary adaptogens that I really love, and I'll talk about here for you. One thing about botanicals, they're multitasking, okay? They do many different things. When I say that, what does that make you think when I say that? Oh, we don't know what they do. What do you think? I mean, is it it's a good thing? They're multitaskers, okay? They do things. And for me, nutrients are the building blocks. Plants direct function, okay? The body directs function. Plants work with the body to direct function, okay? Response versus function. Enhance efficiency, okay? I don't need to give a person a hormone to make them feel better, okay? If I can make the hormones that they have and the receptor systems they have work better, that's where I'm going to start with them. And for me, 90% of my menopausal women who have what I call kidney yin deficiency, which manifests with these hormone imbalances, I get them well with herbs, botanicals. It works amazing. How many women have I helped with their hot flashes and night sweats and their bone health? And then you get your botanicals, then you get your vitamin D, your vitamin K, your calcium, your hydroxyapatite, all the things you need to get the bone matrix going. Make sure they have enough of that. Plants will help direct stuff back onto the bone, get the calcium in its right place. But efficiency. One of the things, a simple place we look to at just sort of efficiency is, you see people with cancer, you're looking at their CBC and their platelet level comes back. And the platelet level is 140, they're low. It's like, but the platelet volume is high, it's 10.8. That's the body adapting. They have less platelets, but the ones that they have gotten bigger. They're working to overcome the deficiency. And the body does that in so many ways, especially in the bone marrow. It's really a beautiful system. Just give you an idea of some of our multitaskers. This is just drawn from Dr. Agarwal, who's the expert in curcumin right now. He's at MD Anderson. He's working with about 1,000 patients currently taking curcumin with chemotherapy. And the dosage is about 4 to 8 grams a day for people with all kinds of different chemotherapies. And just this is an idea of just some of the pathways that we've identified that curcumin either upregulates or downregulates. That's a multitasker. That's amazing to me. That one plant compound does that. So, keep talking about adaptogens. I'm going to talk about them. What do? They enhance the general resistance of the entire body. They're non-specific and they have a normalizing effect on the body. They normalize function. They enhance anabolic metabolism at no expense. They maintain or restore homeostasis, and they're non-toxic. This is the work of Nikolai Lazarev, who coined the term adaptogen in 1947. He carried forth some of the work of Claude Bernard and Hans Selye. And interestingly enough, is the work in Russia started with them trying to figure out, okay, how do we get in the military and in the cosmonauts and the astronauts, how do we get these people to work well under stressful conditions? So we've been up for days, it's stress, there's toxins, they're just they're driving, they can't, they're in a plane, whatever it is. Well, they started using small doses of glucocorticoid mimics. They started using little bits of cocaine, little bits of methamphetamines, methylphenidate. They try to get people to, okay, does this work? Well, yeah, it works, but you know what happens? Those people have a crash and they get addicted. So they trashed that work and they started looking at something called ginseng. And they started going, well, what's this thing? And they saw that ginseng actually enhanced people's ability to be aware, their motor function, their cognition under stressful situations. And there was no addiction. There was no cost. They actually felt better over the long term. But they found that ginseng was expensive and that some people had they got a little bit irritable from it over time. So they found there are other things to work, and they're kind of the primary adaptogen was actually what was termed Siberian ginseng, or Eleutherococcus centicosus, which was the plant that kind of the kingly adaptogen that got all the research. I mean, there's 2,500 articles. I mean, human studies on that plant. It's phenomenal when you dig into the research, especially in Russia. A lot of it's not available. We have a good Russian connection, so we've been able to get all this amazing research. Actually, Ben Tabachnik, who was the director of the research team in Russia in the 80s, partnered with Donnie building some of our formulas. And he's been an incredible source of information for us. He passed a couple of years ago, but incredible man who just devoted his life to adaptogens in sports. So just kind of quickly, strengthening, normalizing, this involves systems. We're talking endocrine, neurological, immune, and you can't separate one from the other, folks. It's all one system. It's all together. You're not gonna, if you're gonna get the person's immune system well, you gotta get their endocrine system well. If you're gonna get their neurological system well, you've gotta get their whole system well, okay? Some of the things we do, mediating cell behaviors, increasing protein synthesis, helping with development and repair of neurons, and we have so much research on this subject. It's actually kind of incredible. Donnie has devoted his life to just pulling together research on this subject. So if you ever have questions, you want anything from us, we're more than happy to give it to you. Mitochondrial function. Adaptogens enhance mitochondrial function. What a beautiful thing, and tons of research on this as well. Mediating inflammatory and oxidative stress, protecting us against neurotoxins. Paper after paper after paper, human studies, animal studies. It starts with in vitro studies way back, and then they just kept moving forward. So many of these things are human studies, and it's so hard to get human studies on plants in cancer. It's really hard, and nowadays it's so hard because you don't make money on plants. What company is going to fund your $2 million research project to say that a plant works? Well, that sucks. It just took away a bunch of our money. If you got a drug that's going to work, and you're going to, I'll pay you $50 million if you're going to make me $5 billion. But if you're not going to make me money, well, how am I going to support you? So it's really challenging to get research in these areas to advance at this point in time. And we're working on it. We're trying. So adaptogens have 3 primary categories: primary, secondary, companion. The primaries are very important. Panax ginseng, Eleutherococcus centicosus, Rhodiola, Rosea, ashwagandha, Aurelia manchurica, Schisandra. Those are all plants that most people can take daily and do really well with. Okay? The secondary adaptogens, they generally support the primary adaptogens in their function, but they're a little more specific. Primary, they normalize function across the body. Companion adaptogens are more nutrients, herbs, nutritional agents that support the function of the primary adaptogens, okay? Kind of a broad thing to get you guys into. Some compounds in adaptogenic plants. Triterpenes, the ginsenosides are a great example. Those are plant protective compounds. So the plants use that to protect themselves. Well, it also protects us from stress. Plants are amazing. They're autotrophs. They can't move out of the way. right? When there's danger coming. They're stuck. So they're masters of chemical defense. That's what they do. And when they create this incredible chemistry inside themselves, they're actually supplying us with an incredible source of protection because it works for us too. The triterpenes are similar to structures in our body. The phytosterols like cytositerol. These are plant lipid compounds that help make up the cell wall. They also have an influence on our cell membranes in our bodies. Phytolectosteroids. These are very anabolic agents. Okay, they're very building to tissue, to bone, to muscle. Fatty acids, flavonoids, lignans are structural components of the plants. Like we talk about flax seeds. Well, we want the lignans in there. When people are talking about doing juicing, and you want to get your kid doing a bunch of juice, remember that when you pull the lignans out, and you pull the fiber out, all the sugar's there. And it's not buried in those big molecules that the body has to slowly take apart and create that slow and low glycemic load. So, I'm a little on the fence about the whole juicing thing, a little bit for the right people, but don't get everybody doing just juices. Vitamix it if you're going to do it. Primary adaptogen, these are the rules set up for the adaptogens, okay? Solid scientific research, tons of research, okay? Enhance the general resistance of the entire body. Act in a specific way, normalizing the body against all forms of stress, and maintaining or restoring homeostasis, not pushing the body one way or the other. They're safe and have no side effects even with prolonged consumption. And a lot of the data we have is 10-year studies. A simple study example is 2 factories. One factory gets an adaptogenic tonic in the morning, like a shot of Eleutherococcus, and then a shot before they go home at work. Every single day for 10 years. All the way along the way, they do a questionnaire every couple months, every month. Okay, what's your mood? They look over, what's your productivity? How many hours have you been able to work? How many days have you missed? How many times were you sick? And everything improves over time. Amazing, no toxicity? 10 years taking the same plan? I come from traditional Chinese medicine too, and it's like, you give something an herb or a formula for a period of time to correct something, and then, then we move them on to the next thing. It's really amazing though, you can see that some of these plants out there are actually so good at healing for us. There's no toxicity with this plant. I mean, the LD50s for those plants are ridiculous. You'd have to eat pounds of them, it would be ridiculous to get that to that point. So here's our Eleutherococcus, the wrong, inappropriately named Siberian ginseng. It's only called that because every country has a ginseng. Because ginseng comes from the word Panax, and Panax comes from the word panacea, which is a cure for everything. So any country you go to, you're going to find they have their own ginseng, and so this is a plant from Siberia, and so they call it Siberian ginseng, but it's really not. It's not a Panax. But incredible for kids, this plant is so safe. They can take it every day, and it normalizes function. So if we don't know if they have an MTHFR defect, we don't know how they make their neurotransmitters in the first little part of that folic acid cycle, methionine cycle. We don't know all that. We can't quite know it all yet. But if you give them some herbs that are normalizing, they have some effect on that system. Okay. Obviously, if they're folic acid deficient and they're not reducing their folic acid, well, you got to give them the reduced form. You got to help them out. But this plant will help a lot. One of the cool things about Eleutherol, decreases adrenal hypertrophy. So when you're in that feedback loop and your body's trying to make cortisol, it's demanding that you take more of your essence and put it in the form of cortisol to get into this stress response. Well, your adrenal gland's going to swell. Some research is showing us that actually this plant taken daily over a long period will actually decrease the hypertrophy, showing that your body doesn't need to make that gland grow big in order to make more cortisol. It actually spares cortisol in the body. Also spares vitamin C loss from the adrenal gland. It's just such a broad-reaching plant as well, which is just amazing. And like I said, there's so much research. Rhodiola, the plant I mentioned, it grows in a really harsh environment, again. And you can't take these plants and grow them anywhere. You can't just put them on a farm in Minnesota, which is actually where I come from too. I come from Minnesota, I grew up in Minneapolis. You can't put them on a farm there and then grow them, and over a few generations you think, this plant's great. No, it's not great. It doesn't have any of the environmental conditions. I said it's an autotroph. It's got to make chemicals to interact with its environment. If you change the environment, you change the chemicals. So we got to keep, either keep the same gene and keep replicating a new wild-crafted species each time, or you keep them in their natural environment, preserve their natural environment, and then you can get the right plants with the right compounds. But this plant also increases superoxide dismutase, which, again, there's so much research, I didn't even want to put it up here, you guys, just a couple things. I mean, it's literally extensive. I think there's like 300 references just in our monograph for this plant. But enhancing immunity, improving mood, and lots of the research on improving learning and memory, enhancing central nervous system activity. So, for kids that are a little hyperactive, it can be really nice and calming for them. For kids that are a little depressed, it can be a little uplifting for them. Does it seem weird that one thing can do that? Does it? Is it hard to believe that one thing could do both? Could be amphoteric in its function? Is that kind of foreign to most people here? I'm just curious. No, it seems like it's real, right? It's believable. Well, I'm telling you, it works. And it's not like you're pushing something in a phenomenal way, but as the foundation of our work, this is how you can help normalize function. Okay? It's part of what we do. It's a big part. Schisandra, Chinensis, we use the seed extract. Most people are using the fruit extract, okay? And the fruit actually has acids in it, the tannins that actually break down some of the most important compounds, the schizandrins and the rosavins, inside the seed. So now we know that the seed is where we get the best potency. So we only use the seed extract from Russia, and it's an incredible plant that is, liver regenerative, hepatocyte regenerative, like nobody's business, like milk thistle, similar in that way. In Chinese medicine, it astringes the kidney essence. It literally helps you, they thought of it as it helps you hold your essence. Well, we could say, well, it spares glutathione. Well, I just said essence becomes glutathione. I've actually bridged from essence into glutathione now, and we can use this plant. And there's actually research saying that it preserves glutathione. I think that's just so cool that we can actually take that mythological perspective, that elemental perspective, apply it, and then see it manifest in modern research. And then to me, the bridge is so clear. But that's my life work. So hopefully I'm helping you guys see it that way too. I'm hoping. Okay. I'm trying. Okay. Schisandra, just some research, improving memory and learning. The thing, I'm throwing these plants up here because these plants you can give to any kid. It's fine. Don't give them a ton of it. Give them a bunch of these plants in a small amount every day. Especially if you don't know what the heck is going on. You know they're going to benefit from this. Okay? There's no downside. I've never seen a kid take adaptogens and suddenly go crazy. I've never seen a kid take adaptogens and get sick. Not once. And neither the colleagues I work with. The four of us, just in our small group, there's 150 years of experience there. It just doesn't happen. So, I just can't emphasize enough the importance of just, a few of these plants. And again, we're formulators, so we put together lots of plants together. Many multitaskers working together, so you don't need to, you don't have to try to worry about if there was a toxicity, giving somebody tons of one plant over a long period of time. Not nearly as good as giving them a bunch of plants together in a low amount so they can all have a gentle effect and be synergistic. And we do a lot of work with herb-drug interactions too, and synergy is what you see most of the time. And also with drugs and plants. And I'm going to talk about St. John's wort because it's sort of like the limelight poster child for drug interactions, and it's an amazing plant. It really is. I'm going to talk to you about it. I want to get to that point. Ashwagandha, another plant, the strong-smelling plant that has a real kind of acrid, bitter kind of taste, but at the end of that taste, at the very end of it, it has a real sweetness. And that sweetness is its deep hormonal benefit. It's like very nourishing to the endocrine system, the neuroendocrine system. It's just real gently tonifying to the body. Good for people with wasting syndromes, ataxias, just real gently helping to tonify the body. And if you're using it as an herbalist, you formulate it to a certain degree for different people based on their constitution. But in general, you can give people a small amount of this every day over the long term and do them a great benefit. This plant is another adaptogen, more like a secondary adaptogen, Bacopa. Its Ayurvedic name is Brahmi. I love this plant. It's come to me in the last few years. It's just phenomenal. A couple companies make like an extract, just a standardized extract with bacopicides in it that are really nice and really helpful. It's very balancing to the nervous system and to the mind. It's, if you take it for yourself, you'll find that your memory is just a little bit clearer. It's like if you reach down those trails you haven't been on in a while, like you haven't walked on that path for a long time, there's a lot of bushes growing over it, and you're back down. Well, you get through the bushes and you see, oh, that was that guy's name. I didn't remember that the other day, but then you remembered it. I honestly have experienced that, but aside from that, the research is extensive also. Enhancing GABA, it's a very good GABA enhancer. And I personally have found that giving GABA hasn't done a lot for me. I like using other things that are precursors to GABA. And the plants will help you get there, but some of the nutrients are really important too, and I'll hit those at the end. But, I want to enhance systems. Same with glutathione. I don't give glutathione. I know some people are doing IM, some people are doing different forms and getting some good results, but you can build glutathione in the body, and it's really beautiful when we do that. Just some Bacopa research, antidepressive, So here you have it's calming and focusing to the mind, but it also makes you feel good. Amazing. Specifically researched with ADD and ADHD. This plant is shown already in some research. This is 10 years ago from India, but a real nice study. If you want any of this research, let me know, and I'll pass it on to you. A human trial again. I don't think there was a placebo in this one. American ginseng, another one of my favorite plants, actually grows really well here in Wisconsin. Again, has great activity. As in Chinese medicine, it's a qi tonic. It gently builds the energy of the body. It kind of gives a little bit of an energetic boost. But at the same time, it's normalizing, and it's not warm like the other ginseng. I said the Panax ginseng, which is a little warming. So for a lot of people, especially younger people, the American ginseng is really nice because it gives them that little lift. And remember, how do we get those ADD kids? What's one of the main approaches? How do you get them to calm down? You give them Ritalin, right? You give them a little speed, right? That's methylphenidate, right? I mean, that's what we do, right? I mean, that's one of the standard approaches. Well, a lot of these herbs can stimulate somebody, but with the ADD kids, they calm them. It's really amazing to see how that works. And so using these plants together, you're not only working on that mitochondrial dysfunction, you're helping repair the gut, you're helping the neurological function by protecting the neurons, and you're giving them a little bit of a focusing energy. Gotacola, great plant again, strengthens the collagen, great for the mind, improves cerebral blood flow. I'm not going to go into that plant, but it also has been shown to elevate the mood and also suppress amyloid beta toxicity. Okay? Licorice, I love this plant. Not only does it spare cortisol, balances the adrenals, has an incredible effect on how our cortisol system works by, what does it do? Glycyrrhizic acid. What does it do? It inhibits 11-beta steroid dehydrogenase. And of course there's two different parts to that molecule, but it actually spares cortisol. So it can actually maintain cortisol levels in the body. So when people are on steroids, as they're coming off of steroids, I give them a little bit of licorice, and it's wonderful. Because the people who are out there saying, oh, but pseudo-hyperaldosteronism, they're gonna get high blood pressure. I'll tell you what, I've given licorice to hundreds of people. I've had like one person that actually had that happen to them. And they were so sensitive, you could give them a tiny bit and they'd react. But it was a very obese person with lots of salt, mineral, and corticoid imbalances, okay? It's not a normal thing. It's when the body is very out of balance. But also building DHEA here with licorice. One of the things that licorice does, it coats the gut, it builds the mucus lining, protects the body. It's known in Chinese medicine to clear toxins, and it's in about 75% of all Chinese classical formulas have licorice in it because it reduces toxicity, it benefits the gut, it builds the spleen and the stomach energy, and it synergizes and harmonizes the other plants. Love that herb. Another one here, Poriococcus. This is the mushroom, the Fuling mushroom. Great work on the mind, but also helps clear dampness and turbidity. And I don't want to get into that concept, but kind of helps get that extra little bit of yuckiness that we get from eating the wrong foods every day. It'll help clear that out. You combine it with other things for depression, and it has a real nice role in just keeping the spleen and stomach, the digestive system working really appropriately. I talked a little bit about curcumin. Man, it's amazing how much work it does for us, that plant. Curcuma aromatica, amazing amount of work. Beta amyloid inhibition, tons of research, reducing heavy metal toxicities. And then there's ginkgo, protecting against mercury toxicity, suppressing amyloid beta. So I want to talk about St. John's wort. I love this plant. It's kind of like our neurological adaptogen. And when you go back to the herbalists and the vitalists, the eclectic physicians, you see that St. John's wort was used as an amazing remedy for neurological problems. Like severe meningitis. This is where this plant was given in teaspoon doses. And I've used it in that context with great effect, with other things as well. But this plant has incredible benefit for the neurological system. It's very unfortunate that this plant is not understood more and that research hasn't gone into understanding it. And I want to talk about that in more detail. One of the things that St. John's wort is known to do is to upregulate or induce several known, liver hepatic detoxification pathways. Right? One of the big ones is 3A4. And I mean, working in oncology, every oncologist is saying, oh, that plant induces 3A4, don't touch it. Oh, don't eat any foods because those all induce 3A4. Any plant basically induces 3A4. But St. John's wort also induces CYP2D6. Well, CYP2D6 is also the pathway that tamoxifen uses to become endoxifen, the active component of that drug, to inhibit breast cancer and, estrogen-positive breast cancer. That's, do you guys understand that? You know what I'm talking about? Tamoxifen has an estrogen receptor and an antagonist, right? It works at the alpha receptor. Well, interestingly enough, is that people who were getting depression treatment from their doctor were getting SSRIs. You can name any of the list of them. And those SSRIs actually inhibit CYP2D6. So now we know that actually people who are on tamoxifen simultaneously with an SSRI did not get the benefit from tamoxifen that they were told they were going to get. They just inhibited. So we're talking about interactions. So people are worried about St. John's wort, and St. John's wort actually induces CYP2D6, meaning that it converts tamoxifen into endoxifen. So it actually benefits that patient, okay? So I'm not saying you just use St. John's wort freely, but I'm saying that we don't understand it enough to make it the scapegoat for all these problems that it has, okay? Newly published animal study, incredible stress reducer. One of the things in the neurological system, reduces stress, anti-depression. And this is where I find this plant is so amazing. You know, where does it grow in Oregon? It grows along the sides of the roads that have been cut. It grows up around clear cuts. It kind of takes over where the environment's been damaged. It's rich in something called hypericin and hyperforin. Those compounds do a really nice job. They're very helpful to the mood. They just kind of help the person feel better. If you've ever taken that plant over a long period of time, you know what I'm talking about. We know that it has some monoamine oxidase inhibition activity, has some activity as an SSRI, but it doesn't act like a drug. It doesn't. A lot of comparative trials, antidepressants, and I just want to emphasize that in depression, it's a really big player, and for kids with depression, it's a great plant. Big Cochrane report just came back, reviewed tons of studies. I think that they reviewed 28 studies, superior to placebo in major depression, similarly effective as standard antidepressants, has much fewer side effects than standard antidepressants. And I wanted to just say there was one study that came out on this plant that came out in 2008, same year as that big Cochrane study. Came out of Seattle, actually, out of Bastyr University, you know, out of the Naturopathic College, funded by University of Washington. And they were studying actually St. John's wort's role in ADD and ADHD. They found that there was no benefit. Well, you know, I think it does have benefit in the right context if you use it with kids who are getting a few other things with it. But interestingly enough is that one of the researchers was a guy, Joseph Biederman. And Joseph Biederman was on the panel of research at Bastyr researching St. John's wort in a childhood disorder. Well, back in 2004, if you look at the Washington Times, he was actually indicted for not telling the governing board how much money he was getting kicked back from pharmaceutical industries while he was studying antipsychotic medications for children. And so he got in big trouble because he was actually getting, they actually said he got over $1.6 million that he didn't report based on his, you know, he was doing research to support drugs that treated kids for these problems like depression, major depression, and psychosis. And now he's involved in a trial that shows that St. John's wort doesn't work. I'm just saying. That's all. This is a book I want you guys to know about. It's by Mitch Stargrove, Jonathan Treasure, and Dwight McKee, people that I work with all the time. It's a great book. If you don't have it, it's called Herb, Nutrient, and Drug Interactions. It is the textbook on the subject, especially in oncology. Amazing research. They really review all the research. It's about a 900-page book, thorough analysis of the research, and what I really love is they evaluate the strength of the hypothesis. Whether it's theoretical data, if it's in vitro data, how much data is there? Is it human study? Is it, you know, is it an animal study? And how does it all relate? They do a great job of just giving you a research review. These are some of the nutrients that I think of for brain health. Like I said, I'm bringing you the botanical part of it, but just want you to have this list of the things that I love for brain health. And I generally use them, you know, I don't only give huge doses of one thing or another, but they all play a real nice role for me. Glutathione, like I said, I don't give it, but I do support it in many ways. Vitamin D, hey, I try to have kids getting in the sunlight. That's what I try to have them do. But I also say measure vitamin D levels in your patients. And for us in cancer, any granulocytic disorder, measure both, 25-OH and 125. Because you know what? The conversion is different for everybody. And if you find people with leukemias or sarcoidosis, they can have very high levels of 125, their active form of vitamin D, whereas their storage form, 25-OH, is actually low normal. So just make sure that you're aware of some of the little things. And vitamin D deficiency obviously linked to autism, and we're going to talk more about that. I'm sure people are going to talk about the D receptor and genes and things, so I don't want to go too much into it. But zinc, I think we've really hit zinc all day long. EPA, DHA, again, I think we've hit that one all day long. I'm not of the opinion that DHA is the way to go all the way. Actually, we try to give people a 4 to 3 to 2 ratio of EPA to DHA to GLA, and that's what we try to help, because that way you've kind of overcome their deficiencies if they have one or the other. Everybody's a little different. Some people can't make the GLA, so we like to give them a little bit of all of it, and especially kids, they do great on a little bit of essential fatty acids with a nice little adaptogenic formula. Really nice. L-Carnitine is become really in the limelight also with autism, and 800 milligrams per day showed really good statistically significant improvement in a randomized clinical trial of 31 children with autism. Protein, make sure you give the kids protein. They gotta have the right proteins, and especially amino acids. And this might be a battery issue. This thing's kind of clicking off. But I was thinking about the failure to thrive, what that is for kids who can't quite, they're not growing as fast, they're not developing mentally as fast. There's an issue there somewhere. So we look at this as kind of, again, back to the essence deficiency, and we like to really support the anabolic metabolism of the children. And you can do that to a degree with children for a time where you can really support them and see incredible results. And I wanted to share with you a few things that we use. Some of the anabolic restorative plants were Punticum carthenoides, Summa, Cordyceps, Ashwagandha is here, the Panax ginseng, the white red shed ginseng, which means man root, by the way, and then the Hushawu, Polygonum multiflorum. And these plants are great for kids in the short term when they need it. And I mean, I know I've walked with Dr. Roach on several kids failing to thrive in this area too, and we've just seen incredible results. I mean, just going from basically being depleted, not being able to keep up, not being able to grow appropriately. You get them on some adaptogens, you get them on the right nutrition, you support them with some good anabolic plants, a few other lifestyle changes, and man, they'll start coming back together in no time. It's a really beautiful thing to watch happen. Some anabolic restorative nutrients are branched chain amino acids. Leucine, isoleucine, and valine. They have a specific function because they don't have to be broken down before they're active in the muscles. Glutamine, these are the specifics for anabolic restoration, so you guys have that list. Carnitine and acetyl L-Carnitine. Again, we don't know a whole lot about that. We do know that it mobilizes fatty acids. We do know that acetyl L-Carnitine is better for the brain, for the neurological system, and has a nice, especially for kids, getting a little bit of L-Carnitine in there, but also especially in the neurological diseases of aging. It's a very, very important part of our nutritional protocol. And for me, animal protein is a part of my diet also, and that's where you're getting carnitine in the first place. I was vegetarian for 14 years, and then I shifted to being a free-range vegetarian. And I'm about loved animals, and as long as the animals are loved, I'll eat them. Like, I don't eat the meat here, that's just, but if I know where it's coming from, and in Oregon, I've got all kinds of, farms I can get, and my friends grow lamb, and it's like, okay, well, we called the lamb dinner and breakfast, and then they killed one of them, and then we ate it over the year, and I knew where they came from, and it was love. I actually cuddled it, So that's my thing. Mumi, I want to talk about. This is the Russian shilajit. Mumi is an incredible thing, and it bubbles up out of the mountains in Siberia. It's like this incredible thing. It's pushed by the mineral waters and comes up onto the surface, and people have been gathering it for thousands of years, using it for ataxias, for people that are really deficient. And it has this incredible combination of humic and fulvic acids, and then this broad mineral spectrum, all kinds of things. It's like, they find parts of honey and bees' nets and plants and things in this material, and it's kind of mystical and mysterious, and it's very highly sought after, very prized and expensive. Great one for bone health too, but for anabolic metabolism, it is an incredible nutrient aid. Combine that with some Punticum, combine that with a few of our plants that we've been talking about, you get incredible results with people, and for bone health. Some of the agents we use for depression and anxiety, let me know if I'm out of time. Got a minute? Some of the things we love to use, and some of these things are real good for the liver, and getting the liver moving. Avena sativa, again, for people who have the kind of, you guys, I heard that time is up. Avena sativa actually contains a component in it called avenin, right? Which is similar to gluten. So people who are sensitive, be careful, but that plant is really, really nice to soothe the mind. It's a nervine tonic. Just look at these last couple things. I throw some lithium orotate in there. That's from Hans Nieper. Lithium orotate in small amounts for depression, amazing. For kids, for getting kids off of lithium therapy where they're taking 1,500 milligrams of lithium carbonate a day, this stuff is amazing. You can take out one of these, one 5 to 10 milligram capsule per dose, 350 milligram carbonate, and start to shift them off of that lithium. I've got a couple kids that have done that, and one that's doing it right now. I love tryptophan, I love tyrosine, and when you combine St. John's wort with tyrosine, you get results that you would never get using either one alone. That is an incredible, incredible cure for depression in many children. Oh, and zinc, we use, Grow Nutrients is something that I like to use, and they use, Grow has folic acid, they've got B12, they feed these bacteria cultures the nutrients, and then they kind of centrifuge it off, and so you've actually got it in a biologically active form. I like that. Here's a basic protocol for just supporting glutathione. You guys can have this, just take a look at it. This is how I like to build glutathione, the components, right? Cysteine, Glutamine, glycine, those are your 3 amino acids that make up glutathione. You've got to have those, and then you've got to direct the function. I threw a little bit in there for ADD and ADHD. This has worked for me like, I don't know how many times. An adaptogen formula or a tailored botanical formula, L-theanine, which I love, which is incredible for kids, and you can go 400 to 800 milligrams a day, very focusing to the mind. Comes from green tea, right? It's the one part of green tea that's very focusing, non-stimulating. And then a little bit of glycine. I find that some kids do different things with glycine, so watch that one. It can be very calming and nicely sedating to the mind, but some people get a little weird on it. I'm not sure, I don't know the molecular breakdown of that at this point, but I've seen it in a couple kids. But EFAs, vitamin D and zinc. And then I also read the Amish study. The coolest thing with this Amish study is that these people were not exposed to anything. And actually the vaccine issue, according to the researcher who did this, none of those kids were vaccinated except for the 3 kids that he found right here, the oldest ones that were vaccinated out of these 130 that he should have found had been vaccinated. One of them was from China, actually, an adopted kid that had been vaccinated in China. So there's a big connection. He was making a connection between vaccines, but I think it's more like what Dr. Tom was talking about as well. It's TV, it's video games, it's overstimulation, it's food, it's lifestyle, it's interaction, it's the speed of life. We've got to get all that stuff calmed down for people. We've got to change the lifestyle and get things together. And if you try to find this article, you won't. It's been pulled. It says, sorry folks, sometimes we have to pull an article. I was glad I got it, whatever, 8 years ago, but it's no longer available. So if you want it, I have it. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, sure.
We heard one presentation. Did you hear him pause or say, ah, or whatever he's doing, he's doing it right. I'll take off some hands. And in adults, botanicals certainly that have used are very safe. Is there any situation where if you just simply reduce the dose for kids, that a botanical becomes as unsafe in kids if you just reduce the dose? Can you think of examples of that?
Of when you reduce the dose, it becomes unsafe?
Well, if it's safe in adults,
Yeah.
and you just use a proportional dose in children, is it ever unsafe in children in that situation?
I mean, I would say generally no. It's just that if the more specific you can be about the constitution of the child, the better the herb is applied. But very low toxicity. We're not talking about herbs like belladonna or aconite or gelsemium. We're talking about mostly adaptogens, plants that have been researched and showed no toxicity. So in that context, no. So most of those plants are fine at a lower dosage.
You want to understand about how herbs have effects. So you think of prescriptions as having side effects, but herbs have effects, and I don't know that they really have side effects once you understand what their effects are. Do we have questions in the back from the audience? Well, not at the moment, but yeah, we'll wait for a minute. Do you want to come in? No. I was
going to say it's an honor to have Arnold Brenner here. I got to meet him on the elevator today. I was glad about it.
Dr. Grassi, Ron.
Yes.
Where are you having these lymphocyte B12 levels done? And is there a laboratory that is doing these?
There's a lab called SpectraCell Laboratories. They're out of Houston. This testing was actually developed at University of Texas in Austin about 18 years ago. And how the test is actually done is it's a regular blood draw, but they isolate your lymphocytes and they do a mitogen stimulation for 5 days to see how the lymphocyte responds under more or less perfect conditions. The media that they developed at University of Texas is what's patented. They sold that patenting right to the company called SpectraCell. Then after they do that, after they get the stimulation of 5 days, then they actually take those lymphocytes and they put them in these little plates. And they have little vials in them. And each little vial is missing one nutrient. For example, this one has, they test 33 nutrients. So This one has everything but B1, the next one has everything but B2, and so on. So when they put the patient's lymphocytes in there, if the patient has functional adequacy of B1, when that one does not have B1 in it, it will continue to grow at a certain rate. And they've done that study and they've shown a percentage to growth. So that's how it's actually done. I've been using it ever since it came out. I was very skeptical about it when it first came out 17, 18 years ago, and I actually database my patients. And I have unbelievable case studies I could tell you that. What's nice is a lot of things that Jason said, they correlate well with the peer-reviewed literature. And I mean, for example, with thyroid dysfunction and the zinc and the selenium and migraines, and I mean, there's a lot of different things we see. There's a doctor I was just talking to up in Harvard this week. He's starting to look at Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and this particular test and see. And he's only done 3 kids with it, but they're very close in the findings. So it's very interesting.
So this being measured
Vitamin D is mentioning when I measured, I was having low back pain for 2 or 3 years and didn't know what it was. The first 2 or 3 hours after I got out of bed, I could hardly bend over the time I used, thought I was just getting old. Once I learned I had a vitamin D homozygous receptor polymorphism, and then I got on 18,000 units of vitamin D, my blood levels were great. But when I looked at cellularly, I was slightly deficient on 18,000 units of vitamin D, knowing that was correlated with Alzheimer's, and now I'm at 20,000 units. But if knowing that those receptors were not working properly, I understood why it was lower percentile, and that's where it's important to know. I had a patient 6 weeks ago, B12 level was high in the serum. Checked it intracellularly, it was deficient in the serum. And this is really important for patients. I think it gives you further information. Go ahead.
What is being measured in this process?
What is it measure?
Yeah.
Well, they measure the percentage of lymphocyte proliferation. That's actually what they're doing. Yeah.
There was a Dr. Baker who a number of years ago had a process which he would measure protozoan metabolism, reproduction, and he would again have specimens in which there was just one nutrient that was deficient, the patient's blood was added, and functional deficiencies can be found. The Vitamin Research Laboratory does that. Also, I've not used it, but it's one other factor that may be also helpful in these patients where the levels are normal, but obviously the function is not.
Correct.
No comments? Everybody else is microphone shy, apparently. Your talk about interaction between nutrients was fabulous. It was very informative. There was one of the speakers spoke about sugar and sugar causing hyperactivity. It's known that individuals who are alcoholics are notoriously thiamine deficient. And if they're given glucose intravenously, it'll precipitate Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. A similarity, I think, exists with pediatric patients who are B1 deficient or B12B or thiamine deficient, which you give them a lot of sugar, their behavior deteriorates. And this is one of the other mechanisms that sugar can cause kids to have hyperactivity behavior problem. Plus, a lot of sugar will cause yeast to grow. That's another factor that is a reason not to give sugar.
It's interesting you say that because on the SpectraCell testing, I see a lot of kids that have ADD, hyperactivity, that have low thiamine, and sure enough, you go back to their diets, and of course, they're consuming a lot of sugar, so it correlates very well with that.
My question is for Jason. I'm curious about the rhodiola, and I've been taught that in high doses it is calming on the neurotransmitters, but in low doses it's excitatory. So how do you dose that?
We dose it low, actually, and don't find it to have any of that excitatory effect. I'm not sure where that theoretical data comes from, or if it's someone's experience, but we find with that plant that actually that if you dose it higher, you just don't get any more benefit. That it actually works really well at a low dose and just over time, over a long period. And some people think of it as a stimulating plant, and it may be that I don't give the plant as a single remedy. Very rarely. It's normally as a small part of a formula. And so I'm always thinking about how I can balance, the nature of that plant being a little bit more stimulatory with something else that's a little bit calming.
Can you give me an idea of milligrams?
Well, it would depend on what you're using. If you're are you thinking of powdered extract, or are you thinking of a tincture?
Powder.
A powder and like a 1-to-1?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, that's the thing about plants, of course, is that you have different tincture strengths, and then you have different powder strengths. But if you got like a standardized like a 1-to-1 rhodiola extract, you could be in the range of 1 to 300 milligrams a day, kind of that kind of a dosage. But like I said, I wouldn't do it as a standalone. I'd use it with other things to get the best effect.
As a standalone, it would be a risk for bipolar disorders, so that would be one potential contraindication for use.
I think that's 1 to 2 grams too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big of those. Okay. One other comment about rhodiola. Donnie talks about how it's dry. And of course, from the arid region, and that's particularly harmful around here, that's not so bad. But it does have a dryness.
Astringent is the word, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, could you comment specifically for children how you like to dose tinctures or capsules, or how you get that into them, and challenges, and how you get over some of those challenges with pediatrics? Thanks.
It's funny that you say that, because that was actually, I was going to build a slide that was just that. And I was like, God, how am I going to get through all this information in the first place? Got to have a slide on how you give kids medicine, right? Well, I mean, actually I do have I guess I took it out, but it was a slide. And so the first way is a smoothie. And that's my favorite way, is you actually build a smoothie. And I like to base that on coconut oil, coconut milk. Coconut milk smoothie with like some frozen berries is a real nice place to start. Blend that up, and then you can, if you want to add sweeteners, things like stevia and lohan are my 2 favorite sweeteners, which have no sugar in them. Glycine actually is a very sweet amino acid also, so it can be used as part of the taste issue for kids. And then you can use powders and liquids in the smoothie and blend those in just nice and gently once you've got kind of a nice mixture. You can also, put that stuff in the freezer and cool it down. Sometimes I use a little teeny bit of essential oils too. If they're taking like a liquid, let's say, you could use a tiny bit of peppermint oil or a tiny bit of lavender, something that's just enough to really get the taste, something completely different, to get rid of the bitterness. And then of course syrups and little bits of, depending on if you're trying to get them really off sugar, but mixing things in honey if you need to. That's the way that I generally approach it.
Could you comment on the difference between turmeric and curcumin? Are there advantages to turmeric over curcumin?
Well, so curcumin is actually the kind of, it's a word that really pertains to the 3 main curcuminoids from the curcuma longa plant. So, the plant turmeric contains a percentage of curcuminoids, and it's, nowadays they're standardizing it to 95%, but that's the extract. But the plant turmeric itself has a lot of other components, and the benefit's going to be similar, and actually when you talk to Dr. Agarwal personally, he'll tell you that, if we were researching turmeric, I bet we'd see just as good results. That's what he's saying. He's been studying this for 40 years. But the curcuminoids have the data on them. There's the methoxy curcuminoids, there's the deoxy, there's a few different versions, but there's 3 main ones. I don't remember the names at this point, but that's what